Hey guys, so for today's quick tip, I'm going to talk about actions in Photoshop. I want to kind of show you how to use them or what they're used for and how to create custom ones so that you can use them later on. I think they're powerful, they're important, and they're useful. Basically, what an action is it lets you record. Man, how do I explain it? It lets you record a series of steps that you do in Photoshop so that later on you can just with one click have Photoshop do that whole series by itself. There is a retouching technique out kind of getting popular right now called frequency separation, which basically what you do is you take your image and you make two layers. One layer you blur is going to be your color layer, and your other layer becomes your texture layer by doing a series of steps. And it requires about, I would say about 6 total steps to get the layers ready for you to start retouching with them. And if you were to do these every time, you could see how 6 steps would be better off if you could just hit a single button and Photoshop would do it for you. So I figured that would be a good way to show actions and how to create an action. And then after I show you how to create it, I will show you what it's used for and give you a little preview of frequency separation, which you can find on YouTube. There's a ton of tutorials on how to use that frequency separation for retouching skin and blemishes. So let's get started. I have my Photoshop open and I have an image of Julia, who I shot a while back, and I thought it would be a perfect image for just because we need an image to play with while we're creating these actions. So the first thing you need to do is you have your image, and so you go and you find your actions. You go to Window, Actions, or you can go right here. This is the Action button. It brings up my window, and I'll make it bigger so you guys can see it. I actually have quite a bit of actions that I have either gotten online or purchased from other people. A lot of them are just to do different things, but I want to show you how you go about doing a new action and how you go about making your own custom actions so that you can later on use them. So basically all it does is it records any steps you do to your image, and then once you record it all, you can play it back basically on any image you have. And there's some really cool little tricks to it that I think are important. A lot of people don't touch on, which are at any step. If like, let's say you opened up an image and you had it do a blur, right? Well, if you just record the blur, it'll do that same blur every single time, whether it was 10 pixels, 15 pixels blur. But you can also have it give you a dialog box so that it opens up the blur dialog box and it shows you what the original 10 pixel blur was, but you can change it. And that's an important part, of the steps, because you don't always want the same amount of blur. If you want a different type of blur or a different amount, it's better to have a dialog box that just asks you than to just not have the power to do that. And I'll show you how to do that. So let's get started. Basically, the first thing you want to do is you have your image and you haven't touched anything. This is my image straight out of the raw processor. First thing you're going to do, you're going to go to your Actions panel, and you're going to hit New Action right here. This is the New Action button. And a dialog box is going to come up. And I'm going to call it Frequency Separation. And it asks you where you want to put it. I have all these different folders of stuff. I'm just going to put it in my default Actions folder, which has like the basic actions that come with Photoshop, just for now. You can also set a function key if it's something that you use a lot and you want to just hit your function key on your keyboard. You can set a function key to it. I don't do that. I actually set it up in button mode, and I'll show you how to do that too. And then color, you know, you can label them by color as well. So I'm just going to do that now, and I'm going to go hit record. So now it's recording. See right here? It opened it up and it's recording. It's telling me it's recording. Anything I do will get recorded. So the first thing I do for the frequency separation is I'm going to duplicate this layer. And it's a smart object, so I actually have to rasterize the layer. You don't always have to do it, but since my layer is actually a smart layer, I had to separate it because I can't use a smart layer for this. So I'm going to duplicate it twice. The first one I'm going to rename to low. The second one I'm going to rename to high. And this is just part of the frequency separation. I'm going to turn off this one and I'm going to show this one. I'm going to blur the low layer with a Gaussian blur. And you basically want to blur it to where the skin tones are, you no longer see any texture, you just see kind of color. You just see blending color. Usually around 8 to 10 pixels I usually find to be about right. But this is one of those where I'm going to show you where it's going to ask me every time how much blur I want. Because if my image is a lot bigger, then it's more blur. If my image is a lot smaller, then it's less blur. But usually it's around the 8. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and go with 8. So then you hit OK. So that's your low layer. Then I'm going to turn on my high layer. And for the high layer, it's you go to Image. Where is it? Apply Image. And then you want to have low on the layer. You want to set this to subtract. Or subtract. And then you want to hit this, leave on 2 and 128. And that's this apply image, that's this high frequency image. And then I'm going to change this to soft light, I believe. Let me check my notes real quick. No, sorry, linear light. Change this to linear light. Where is linear light? Okay. So basically this sets up my 2 layers for retouching. Basically the top layer, the high frequency, is the texture layer. And the bottom layer is the color layer, so that when I'm retouching, I'm retouching either or. And it works really well. So the next thing I want to do is, and this is just for organization, I'm going to put them in their own layer, and I'm going to call that layer frequency separation retouching. And I'm going to hit OK. And that is my entire action. Okay, so I know now that the action is finished, so I want to stop this action here. Okay, so I'm going to stop it from recording the action. Now the action is finished. It's done. It's right here. This is my action. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what would happen if I'm going to delete what I just did, and I'm going to start it, and I'm going to play it. Now, basically, this is where I was telling you about button mode, but there's 2 ways to play it. If you have your actions in this view, which is a list view, and you want to run your frequency separation, you just hit the play button, right? So you hit play, and it goes through the entire cycle that I just showed you, and it created my, see how it recreated the low, the high, and the frequency separation folder? It basically ran all of those things that I had already done that took me, say, 5 minutes to do, or 3 minutes to do, whatever it was, and just did them all in one shot. Now, I haven't set up any dialog boxes yet, so it just went and it punched in all the numbers that I had already punched in without letting me change anything. This is not what I want. So, I want to go in here. Okay, so the first thing it did is duplicate current layer. That's fine. I don't care about that. There's no dialog box there. It rasterized that layer. There's no dialog box there. Duplicate it. I duplicated it again. The time of select layer, set current layer. Oh, I renamed it to low. I selected this one. I renamed it to high. High. Okay, select layer low. here's my Gaussian blur. This is the first actual dialog box that comes up. So I want to click on this little icon right here. And this little icon right here tells it, leave the dialog box, stop where you're going and show me the dialog box so that I can change it if I want to. So I want it there. I also did it on, not in there, but an apply image. Remember I did the apply image and I had to change some of the blending modes? And the truth is, you don't really need a dialog box here, but sometimes when the image is different, you have to change the numbers in there. So I'll set that in there. And I think those are the only two real dialog boxes I need to see in this one, just because it's a simple. So now let me show you what happens when I run it. So now I run it, and the first dialog box that you see is the Gaussian blur. So in case I wanted to switch it to, say, well, that's too much, but if I had a bigger image this time and I ran it, it would let me change the amount of blur. So then you hit OK, and it's going to run to the next one. The next dialog box that I told it to come up was the apply image, in case I wanted to, say, change the scale, because if your image is smaller or bigger pixel-wise, sometimes you have to change that a bit. I usually leave it at 2 and 128. Those numbers seem to work really well, but you know, it's just basically letting me have the power to change that if I wanted to. Hit OK, and again, it did that retouching layer, and it's got it all there. Now, the other cool thing about this is, this is my list mode, so I have a ton of actions. You can also go up to this little icon right here and hit button mode, and it'll show you all your actions that you have in what they call button mode. So here's my frequency separation. I usually just leave it like this, and I usually have my palettes on my other monitor, but for the sake of this video, I'm only recording this monitor, so I wanted to bring it in here. But usually, all my palettes are on one side, and I just have an image on this side. But basically, it's the same thing. I mean, if I click on it, it's like clicking play, but it's just a simple. I don't have to find it. I don't have to click on it and then click the play button. I just click on it, and it'll do it itself. It said I couldn't do it because I had a bunch of layers already here, and it needs to work off of this layer. Oops, I clicked on the wrong one. That was a noise layer. But, okay, so let's say I click on frequency separation. It's going to give me the same dialog boxes. I'm not going to change anything. It's going to put it in a folder, and it did it all in button mode. And I have actions for, you know, there's the basic ones. I have a high pass sharpen that I use a lot. I have a noise that I use a lot. I have a dodge and burn layer. So I have a lot of actions that I use quite often. Okay, so I'm going to put this here. So that is basically actions. I wonder if I need to say anything else about it. Oh, well, the other thing you can do is, and here I'll show you one other action that I'm going to just create real quick because it's important for the next part of this. But let's say I was doing let's say I took a picture of, I went to a photo shoot and I had 100 pictures. And I have them all in RAW, and I want to change them all to JPEGs. Well, you know, if you have Lightroom or if you have some other photo software, you could do it as a batch process. But Photoshop does that too. It's just a little more technical. The first thing you would do is you would create an action. So again, let's record. Let's say I wanted to convert this to a JPEG. So I'm going to make a new action, and I'm going to call it Save as JPEG. Right? I'm going to put it in my default actions. I'm not going to give it a function key. I'm not going to give it a color. I'm just going to hit record. So what do I want this JPEG to do? Well, I just want it to go File, Save as, JPEG. Hit Save. It's going to ask me my quality. Let's say I just want it at 10. And then if you want to resize it to a certain size, you can also have that before. You know, if you want to say, let's say you're saving JPEGs for Facebook, you can make an action that says save for Facebook, and it'll resize it to, I think Facebook is like 720 pixels, and then you make it a JPEG and you hit OK. Right? So then you stop your file, and then you have a save as JPEG action. So anytime you have an image, and I'm going to throw away that JPEG that I just made, but let's say I have an image and I'm going to go to button mode, and I want to save it as a JPEG. Oh, I have a save as JPEG button. So boom. Save as JPEG. It did all of that, and it put a JPEG right on my screen, on my desktop. There's my JPEG. Okay? So now, here's where Photoshop gets really interesting. I'm going to save that action. So now, I'm going to do this. But let's say I had 100 images in a folder. So I can go to Photoshop, Automate, and Batch. Okay, so batch processing. Here in Batch, it actually asks me which action I want to use. I can use any of those actions. If I wanted to do a frequency separation to all of my images, I could tell it use that. But I can also do Save as JPEG, select a folder that has all of those images, whether they're raw files, TIFFs, whatever they are. You choose that folder. It has other options like, override action open commands. So like if you created an action that actually opened an image, then saved it, then closed it, well, you don't need it to, the batch already knows that it's going to do an open, so you override the open. If you have subfolders in that folder, it'll include those. This file open dialog boxes and color warnings. Sometimes when you open a file, it tells you, I can't read this file, or the color is different than your monitor. So if you wanted to bring up those warnings, you would have to hit enter every time for it to actually run that batch. So if you suppress them, it'll just open them up, basically skip those dialog boxes and just start going through this whole batch process. So that's where actions and batch becomes kind of really important. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say about actions. If you want to learn more about frequency separation retouching, I will be doing a tutorial on it, but as a really quick preview of that tutorial, basically what you have here is when you have something like this, your high layer is your texture layer and your bottom layer is just your color layer. So you would paint, you would clone or brush. Let's say you wanted to lighten some of these darks up, so you can select a lighter color. Oops. What did I just do? Oh, okay. I think I froze for a second there. But, yeah, okay, so. Oh, I have a weird brush on, I think. Where's my brushes? Brushes. There we go. So I could. Select this color right here and just start lightening up some of the darks, you know, if they're too dark, you know, a little bit of this. Just select some of those colors. And I'm not, and I'll show you in a second, I'm painting with a brush, which usually removes all the texture because it's just a straight brush. But since it's on this bottom layer, since it's on this layer that's already blurred, all it's doing is putting color in here, but the texture is all right here, right? So then, on this layer is where you do all your blemish removal. So let's say you have some zits. Ooh, that did not look good. Where am I? Oh, you want to make sure you use not sample all layers. So there you go. So you want to make sure you're only sampling this layer. So this is where you change all your textures. You know, and you can use the healing brush, the regular healing brush, the spot healing brush. Again, you got to make sure it's only current layer. And see how, so basically what you're doing is that there's a blemish there. So I want to change, I want to remove that, but I want to add the texture from here and remove that texture. Same here. Let's say I want to remove that and I want to remove that. So that is, in a nutshell, frequency separation. I will be doing a whole video on a full retouching using frequency separation. But for this video, it's just a quick tip on actions. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time.